There's a photograph on my phone I have never deleted that was taken at a birthday dinner. I am sitting at the head of the table, surrounded by people I love, holding a glass of wine and laughing at something someone said. I look genuinely happy. And if you showed that photo to anyone who knew me at the time, they would say, yes, that is exactly what his life looked like. Full, warm, good. I was 43 years old in that photograph. And I was living a lie. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind of lie. Not an affair or a secret life. Just the quiet, deeply human lie of staying in something that had stopped working years earlier because I was too afraid of what fixing it would cost me. My 40s looked successful from the outside. Career stable, home established, kids doing well. And somewhere inside all of that apparent stability, my relationship had become something I can only describe as functional grief. We were together. We were not unkind to each other. We had just quietly, without either of us fully realizing it, stopped choosing each other. It took me years, and the kind of honest conversations I should have had much earlier to understand what had actually happened. And when I did, I realized something that stopped me cold. Every single mistake I had made was documented in research, named, studied across thousands of couples over decades. These are not unique to me. They were the entirely predictable result of being 40-something in a long-term relationship, with no one having ever told me what the 40s actually do to love. That is what this is. The conversation nobody had with me. The one I wish someone had sent me when I was 41 and still had time to change everything. I remember a specific Tuesday evening, sitting at the kitchen table across from my partner while we both looked at our phones. Not in comfortable silence, in the kind of quiet that has texture to it. A heaviness. We had been sitting like that for 20 minutes, and I looked up and thought, when did this become the default? I did not say that out loud. I went back to my phone. And that is exactly the kind of decision that compounds invisibly and relentlessly over the years of relationship. Stay with me. Before I walk you through these 8 mistakes, I want to tell you where this comes from, because relationship advice is everywhere, and most of it is shallow and built to generate views rather than actually help you. What happened in my own relationship sent me on a years-long obsession with understanding the psychology of love in midlife. I immersed myself in the research of Dr. John Gottman, whose 4 decades of studying couples produced the most reliable predictive data on relationship outcomes ever gathered. I studied Dr. Sue Johnson, founder of emotionally focused therapy, whose work on adult attachment completely reframed my understanding of why couples in midlife disconnect. I read the longitudinal Harvard Adult Development Study, the longest-running study of adult happiness in history, which tracked hundreds of people from their teens into old age and produced findings about love that every person in their 40s needs to hear. I also worked with couples directly, over time studying more than 200 couples in the 40 to 60 age range specifically. What I found, again and again with striking consistency across completely different backgrounds, is that the same patterns destroy the same relationships in the same ways. That is not a coincidence. That is data. The 40s are a uniquely dangerous decade for love. Not because people stop caring, but because the pressures are so relentless, they quietly erode even strong relationships. Career demands peak. Children's needs are intense. Aging parents require attention. Bodies change. Mortality edges into your peripheral vision. And all of this lands simultaneously on a relationship built with 20s and 30s infrastructure, being asked to hold up under 40s weight. Most couples do not fail in their 40s because they stop loving each other. They fail because nobody warned them about what was coming. Mistake number 1. Treating your relationship like it will maintain itself in your 20s and early 30s. A relationship can survive on momentum. The novelty is sustaining. Physical chemistry is self-renewing. By your 40s, that momentum has spent itself. And this is the point at which the most common mistake happens. People assume that because things feel stable, they are fine. They redirect all their energy toward work, children, and external obligations, and treat the relationship as a container that holds everything else rather than a living thing that requires consistent, intentional nourishment. Gottman's research is unambiguous. The single greatest predictor of long-term relationship satisfaction is not the absence of conflict. is the consistent presence of positive connection. Couples who maintain small daily rituals of emotional contact sustain intimacy through decades. Couples who stop investing in those small moments discover, usually too late, that you cannot stockpile connection. You either maintain it daily or you lose it slowly. Mistake number 2. Letting resentment accumulate without addressing it. The 40s bring an accumulated ledger. Years of small disappointments, unmet expectations, and avoided conversations. Individually, none of these things is catastrophic. Together, over time, they form a weight that changes the emotional temperature of a relationship entirely. Gottman calls this negative sentiment override, the state in which accumulated resentment begins to color every interaction, even neutral ones. A forgotten errand becomes evidence of not caring. A tone of voice becomes confirmation of disrespect. The mistake is not feeling resentment. It is allowing it to accumulate silently because addressing it feels too difficult or too likely to start a fight you do not have energy for. Every time a legitimate grievance goes unaddressed, it does not dissolve. It calcifies. And a relationship that has spent a decade calcifying grievances cannot be repaired with a weekend away or a vague commitment to communicate better. Mistake number 3. Prioritizing everything else over physical intimacy. Physical intimacy in long-term relationships is consistently undervalued, and in the 40s, its decline becomes most acute. The practical pressures are real. Children in the house, exhaustion unlike anything in your 20s, changing bodies carrying their own insecurities. All these things conspire to make physical intimacy feel like one more demand on an overextended system, rather than what it actually is. One of the primary mechanisms through which bonded adults maintain emotional safety with each other. Research on oxytocin, the neurochemical released during physical affection, shows that its presence is not merely pleasurable. It is functionally protective. It regulates stress responses, builds trust, and maintains the neurological architecture of attachment. The mistake people in their 40s make is treating the decline of physical intimacy as a symptom to be managed rather than a priority to be actively restored. You cannot always think your way back to closeness. Sometimes you have to choose your way back, physically and deliberately, even when it feels awkward at first. Mistake number 4. Stopping growing as an individual. The research on long-term relationship satisfaction is clear. One of the greatest threats to a midlife relationship is when one or both partners stop investing in their own individual growth and development. In your 40s, it is easy to feel like the chapter of becoming is largely finished. Identity is established. Role is defined. Personal growth starts to feel like a luxury. What happens when both people stop growing individually is subtle but devastating. Conversations become smaller. Each person stops bringing new things to the relationship. New observations, new enthusiasms, new versions of themselves. The Harvard study found that one of the most consistent predictors of relationship vitality in midlife was whether both partners maintained independent sources of meaning and engagement with life. The most enduringly happy couples were not the ones who became everything to each other. They were the ones who each remained someone worth coming home to. Mistake number 5. Failing to renegotiate the relationships terms. The relationship you built in your 20s and 30s was built by different people with different needs and different versions of the future in mind. The division of labor made sense then. The implicit agreements about what each person needed were negotiated by younger versions of you. For a life that may look very little like the one you're actually living now. One of the most costly mistakes in the 40s is failing to explicitly renegotiate these terms as life changes. Instead of asking honestly what is working and what is not, couples continue running on the original operating system, one that was not designed for this life. Renegotiating a relationship does not mean starting over. It means choosing each other again deliberately as the people you actually are right now. It is one of the most loving things a couple in their 40s can do, and one of the least commonly done. Mistake number 6. Using busyness as an emotional shield. The 40s are objectively busy. But busyness is also one of the most effective and socially acceptable ways to avoid the emotional intimacy and vulnerability a relationship requires. When a couple has accumulated enough unresolved tension, busyness provides perfect cover. There is always a reason not to have the conversation, always an obligation that justifies keeping things at the surface. The mistake is not being busy. The mistake is allowing busyness to become the default distance management strategy, and then believing the story that the busyness is the cause rather than the symptom. If you cannot remember the last time you sat with your partner without a screen, without an agenda, simply present with each other, busyness has become your shield. And a relationship protected behind a shield is not a relationship that is growing. Mistake number 7. Comparing your relationship to the wrong standard. Social media has created a modern relationship pathology. The chronic comparison of your real relationship to the curated highlight reels of other people's. In the 40s, when your own relationship may be carrying real, unresolved weight, is when this comparison is most toxic, but the problem runs deeper than social media. It also includes comparing your current relationship to the early version of itself, before children, before financial pressure, before accumulated conflict. People in their 40s frequently mourn the relationship they had in their 30s without understanding that what made it feel so alive was the absence of the weight they are now carrying. You cannot recreate the lightness of early love. You can only build something richer and more substantial in its place. Comparison is not aspirational. It is corrosive. And in your 40s, when the relationship needs building rather than mourning, it is one of the most reliably destructive habits a couple can share. Mistake number 8. Waiting for the right time to have the honest conversation. There is always a reason to wait. The children are going through something. Work is impossible right now. The holidays are coming. Things seem to be improving, slightly on their own. The conversation will be painful, and you're already exhausted. And so you wait for a quieter season, a calmer week, a version of yourself who feels more ready. That version never arrives. What arrives instead is more time, more distance, more calcified resentment. And then, years later, one person reaches a point of having been quietly resigned for so long that they have nothing left to give the conversation, even if they had it. The research on couples who successfully navigate midlife relational crises is striking. In virtually every case, the couple that came back had the honest conversation earlier than it felt comfortable. Not when they were ready, when the need was real. If there is a conversation you have not been having, this is your sign. The right time is not coming. I want to give you something practical before we close, something you can use today. I call it the midlife relationship audit. Unlike most relationship exercises you will find online, this one does not require both people to participate. You can do it alone quietly. And what it produces is not a score or a verdict. It is an honest map of where your relationship actually stands. The audit has 3 parts, each taking 5 to 15 minutes. Part 1 is energy accounting. For the past 30 days, think honestly about where you have directed your emotional energy. Not where you intended to direct it, where it actually went. Most people in their 40s, when they do this exercise honestly, discover that their relationship receives a consistent fraction of the emotional investment that work, children, and external obligations receive. The first question the audit asks is the investment you're making in your relationship proportionate to what you are asking it to hold? Part 2 is the unspoken inventory. Sit quietly and ask yourself, what is the thing I most need my partner to understand right now that I have not said? What is the resentment I carry most consistently that I have never fully named out loud? Write these things down, not to share immediately, but to see them in legible form outside your own head. Unspoken things maintain their power by remaining shapeless. When you write them down, they become problems that can potentially be addressed rather than feelings that can only be managed. Part 3 is the future projection, the most important and most underused. Project forward 10 years. You are 50-something. The children, if you have them, are largely independent. The acute pressure of the 40s is beginning to lift. What does the relationship look like if nothing changes? Not if things get worse, just if they stay exactly as they are for 10 more years. And then, what would it look like if you addressed even 2 or 3 of the 8 mistakes we discussed? Not all of them. Not perfectly. Just genuinely, imperfectly, with the intention of a person who has decided the relationship is worth the discomfort of doing better. The gap between those two projections is the most important information you will get from this exercise. It is the actual stakes of the choices you are making right now, in this decade, today. There is one additional step. Share at least one finding from the unspoken inventory with your partner. Not all of it. Just one honest sentence about something real you have been carrying that they do not fully know. Spoken not as an accusation, but as an act of deliberate transparency between two people choosing to be in a relationship together. The research on what happens when one partner breaks a pattern of avoidance with a single act of genuine vulnerability is some of the most hopeful data in the field. It consistently shifts something, creates an opening where there is a wall. Do not postpone it. That if something in the last several minutes landed with more weight than you expected, I want you to know that this is not a sign that your relationship is beyond saving. It is a sign that you are paying attention. And paying attention is the first and most important act of love available to any person in any relationship at any age. The 8 mistakes I have described today are not character flaws. They are the entirely predictable outcomes of being human and 40-something, navigating one of the most demanding and undersupported seasons of a relational life. The fact that you stayed through this, through the parts that were uncomfortable, through the parts that required honesty, tells me you have not given up. And that matters more than you know. Here is what I need you to do right now. Leave one comment, one sentence, the most honest answer you can give. Which of the 8 mistakes is costing you the most right now? You do not have to explain it. Just name it. Naming it out loud is the beginning of addressing it. Second, if this describes someone you love, send it to them. Not with commentary, not with an agenda. Just send it. Because sometimes the most loving thing one person can do for another is quietly hand them a mirror at exactly the right moment. Third, subscribe and turn on notifications, because what we talked about today is only the surface. In the coming videos, I will break down each of these 8 mistakes in depth, address how to have the honest conversation you have been avoiding, and tackle the question I get more than any other. What happens when only one person in a relationship is willing to do this work? Your 40s are not over, and neither is what you are building. Do not let the right time be the enemy of the necessary time. The conversation starts now, with yourself, honestly, about what you already know.